They did, and I guess there was a problem with the notification. Or kept it open for this meeting. So I did a presentation.
Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Special board meeting, November 28, 2023. Public hearing on replace chapter 150 of the zoning for the village of Alexandria Bay Code. Roll call. Trustee Campany. Here. Trustee Demo. Absent. Trustee Fulmer. Here. Mayor Jarvis here. A motion to continue the public hearing.
Motion.
Motion by Trustee Caputo, second by Trustee Fulmer. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So the public hearing is open to the public. Obviously, public hearing. I just want to make a few things before we get started. You'll have to excuse, next door we have the Hearts for You grades 4 through 7, and they're making jewelry, so let's try to keep a language appropriate with children next door. Anybody that wants to speak, I'd like to please limit to 3 minutes, and we'll see how everything goes. If you need to speak a second time, we'll see. With that, we open the floor. I commend the company that has been working on this project for the village of Alexandria Bay for pretty much over 2 years. This has been every month that they've had a meeting. It's been open to the public. It's been put in the TI Sun. Okay, somebody told me I'm not required to read the TI Sun, but it is required for us to put it in the TI Sun so the public has access to it. It's also on our website that we have the meetings and so forth. They worked very hard, numerous people from the village. With that, let us know who you are, where you live, and we'll go from there. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Susan Browning. I live at Ioma Home at 56 High Street. And I'm here because I'm a good friend of Bruce's, and Bruce gets agitated. And I said, if we're going to go down, why don't I do the talking? And basically, the change in zoning affects probably more than just the people on Anthony Street, but the change in zoning from the marine development to the residential affects all of the people on that side of Anthony Street, and many of them, in fact, about 25% of homeowners there were not aware that there was going to be a change in the zoning in that area. By the way, I have looked at the comprehensive plan a number of times. I congratulate everybody. I mean, the whole thing was a huge undertaking, and I know that there are a lot of great goals, and I guess mostly we have questions about who it benefits to change that zoning. Why is it changed? And does it benefit anybody on Anthony Street? Does it benefit people in Alex Bay? I'm sure that was discussed. We just don't know what that is. And also along with that is, what does that mean for the people who live on Greens Creek and what they can and can't do if it passes? So we would like to know more about that, thinking that perhaps since there's so few homeowners that are impacted directly by the zoning change, maybe they should have been, you know, a letter to maybe the 10, 12, 14 20 homeowners, I'm not sure how many are there, because so many of them just found out that that was changed, and quite a few people on the street are unhappy about it. So can you elaborate a little bit with us?
I'm gonna ask Russ or Lee if they could answer some of that,
Okay.
please.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming with your concerns today. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Russell Schroth. I was asked to be head of the comprehensive committee that's going to look at, or that has looked at rewriting some of the zoning laws. I assume most people are here because of the Anthony Street question, and I will let you know what our thought pattern is, and I'm interested in hearing what your thoughts are on it too, because we're human and we do not think of every possible thing that happens. One of the goals that the zoning committee had when we started was we wanted to really try to protect the residential zones and keep them residential. As you're aware, people who have lived here for a while, that this town, this village, has been very insulated from outside influence for a very long time. And in the last 3 or 4, that has changed. There's a lot of outside influence that comes in, and I'm not saying that that's necessarily bad. However, a lot of these influencers are coming in with, they have no skin in the game, so to speak. They're looking strictly from a financial standpoint. They don't have any skin. They're just coming in from outside to invest.
Give me a minute. Russ
So,
is explaining, are you want me?
With that in mind, we tried hard to protect the residential zones and residential. Anthony Street, as you know, one side of Anthony Street already is residential, the other side is Marine Development District. We went out in the field a few times and took a look over there, and the opinion that we had was that Greens Creek is such a congested and tiny, mucked up waterway, for lack of a better word, that it doesn't lend itself very well to any kind of commercial marine development. Our thought pattern of that was, since most of the houses are, for all I know, all the houses along there are currently used as residences, let's bring them into the residential zone to preserve that character of the residential zone on that side of the street. That was our thinking. And again, I welcome any other thoughts or any other ideas, something that we perhaps missed, to see what your take on this is.
May I speak again? That makes sense if you're trying to really clean map. And I understand, oh, okay, well, yeah, you know, why don't we just move it over a little, stop. Still don't get why. And what Bruce, for instance, had dredged his little part, wanted to do more, because when you're in high water, you get a little motorboat in there.
Straight in front
There
of
are
you in the
other
back.
people on Anthony Street, I know, that have talked about the fact that that creek is shrinking. There's probably a blockage. Maybe as a group we could work on that, you know. There doesn't seem to be any indication that there's going to be commercial development along there. But what does that mean? Is that, why even change it? I mean, there isn't going to be any commercial development. It's a dinky little creek. It's you know, the homeowners have that creek. That's one reason why a number of people bought their property.
See, that's one of the reasons, is to protect the property owners from giant development in the property next to you, or what if somebody says, I got a couple $1 million, I'm gonna dredge that whole thing out, I'm gonna put in a big marina. How's that gonna affect the people that live on the left side of Anthony Street where that's gonna be affected, if it stays marine development, or if it goes to residential. It's, the whole point is, we're not here to destroy your property. The whole point was to look to protect
I understand.
what happens to your property or next door to your property, so that you still have tranquil privacy you've enjoyed for a long time.
Well, what does it mean then? Does that the homeowners can't dredge?
I have a gentleman on the phone I'd like to, Mr. Brown.
Yes, hello.
Hi,
Am I coming through?
yes,
Okay. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Steve Brown, Skylar C. Brown Jr., actually. I'm the owner of the property at 21 Anthony.
21 Anthony.
I purchased the marine development zone and added value to the property. And I built a new home. I found out just yesterday that I was going to be rezoned. Since then, I have found 5 other property owners, my neighbors, that didn't know about this until yesterday. That would be Bruce Carhart, Neil Willett, Rich Jury, Paul Short, Don and Kim Stiller, and myself. That's 6 people. There are probably about 20 property owners. And so about 30% of us didn't know about this until yesterday. And I believe that the village should have directly notified me of this proposed change. I should not have first heard about this significant change in the potential use of my property in the TI Sun a couple of days ago. Village notifies me about taxes due, about utilities to be paid. They know how to find me. Mostly residential now, the marine development zone and Anthony Street properties are a place for future commercial development. Where is Alexandria Bay going to go if they don't come this way? The boat slips are in short supply, uses will develop. The area is built out residential now, but as the need for commercial use increases, these properties will be redeveloped in line with the original marine development zoning. Marine development properties have long-term value to their owners. That value will be taken away by this zoning change. This plan must include just and fair compensation to the property owners for their loss of value. Oh, and when property values go down, so does the tax base. What problem is driving this push for zoning change? If there's a specific problem. Not blow up the neighborhood zoning that has functioned well for many, many years and will hamper future development on this village.
okay. Let me,
Go on this proposed zoning change. Thank you very much.
okay, thank you.
Skyward. He goes by Skyward. I think Mr. Carhart raised his hand.
Did,
Legal name.
Did we want to make a comment for Mr. Brown, or? Again, this is in no way, let me back up. Changing from marine development to a residential, does that restrict, and because I don't know all the legalities of what is proposed, how does that restrict from marine development if we changed it, if, that's a big if, to residential? So,
Steve, I looked at some of the uses here that, I don't have the old code in front of me, unfortunately. This proposed code, though, we tried to put all the uses in a table form to make it easier to see what's allowed and what's not. So for example, if you compare the residential zone to the marine development zone, and I'm just gonna go down this very quickly. Marine development zone, you're allowed with a special use permit to have a bar and tavern there, whereas in a residential zone, you're not. Okay, so you got bar and tavern, bed and breakfast, commercial boat storage. This is one that's come up, that's something that may be a consideration, is rental cottages. To be honest with anybody, when we were talking about this change, the rental cottages did not even come into play. We were strictly looking at the waterfront usage. Okay? What else is different? Funeral home, you could have a funeral home next door. Hotels, medical facility, office. Mr. Jarvis, the zoning change does restrict what you can do from a residential, or from the marine zone. I think the question is, overall, is it going to be detrimental to the neighborhood to not allow these uses there? That's going to be, and that's a question to everyone here too. By eliminating certain uses, is that going to be detrimental to that side of Anthony Street? Is it going to be an advantage, or is it going to make no difference whatsoever? And that's something that we're going to have to decide as to the impact of this.
And the homeowners would be the ones to give the best input.
And that's why I'm assuming a number of you here are homeowners on the street and have come to.
Who are you? I came in late, so I don't know who
One
you
minute,
guys are.
Bruce, or, Victor, let us know who you are first,
My
before
name
you
is
just
Victor
jump in.
Willick. I'm representing my parents, Victor Willick Senior. He's owned his property for most of his life, and I'm here on his behalf, plus I pay half the taxes on his behalf.
Okay.
So,
Victor, my name is Russell Schroth. I'm a village resident. I was asked by the village board to be on this committee that's doing the comprehensive plan and the zoning rewrite plan. And lucky or not, they made me the chair.
right, well, I didn't even know about this until I got a pamphlet in my hand yesterday. So, that's why, one of the reasons why I'm here,
Okay, fair enough.
so.
Mr. Sweet,
This is concerning the zoning and the enforcement. Has the village board budgeted or put together the thoughts about what the hours and the cost for the zoning and the enforcement? I'm reading 70 pages of regulations here, and I see a lot of regulations that are very specific. In other words, decibels, so on and so forth. So there's definitely training, there's a lot of stuff that has to go on for enforcement of that. Any idea of, like, how much does your officer work now? How many hours a week does he work for the town or the village?
The code allows me, if I need additional information, to answer like decibels, the developer has to pay for engineering costs and stuff that I can't answer. Currently, for me to go through a site plan, you know, I do as much as I can on my own without having to ask for additional, services. I may have, you know, sometimes the people that you know, they'll do it, you know, gratis, you know, as old as I am, you know, contacts and stuff with it. I'm here 2.5 hours, a week. The uses that are going to change in this code, I do not believe it's going to increase my demand for it. There may be some places where we need site plan review where the village planning board may need to come in. They currently do it gratis. You know, they offer their time, and the ZBA also with it. The cost of doing this was something that was provided by not only the local taxpayers, but Jefferson County Planning was involved in it. We all pay taxes to it, and there's not a direct cost back to the village for that. for their services with it.
Pam,
Pam McDowell, I don't live here. My question is, so if that's residential, can people rent their cottages, or if they have cottages to rent, are you saying that wouldn't be allowed because it'd be a business?
Cottages, or are you talking about the hotbed subject of short-term rentals?
Either one, it's one and the same.
As of right now, short-term rentals have no regulations in the village. So that's not affected regardless of what zone things are in right now. To my knowledge, there are no properties along that side of
But
Anthony Street.
if in the future they wanted to build a cottage on their property and rent it out, then would they be not allowed to do that?
Depends on what the conditions are. Lee, what is, there's a lot in here and I don't remember it all. Lee, what was the, what is the ruling for outbuildings?
Accessory building,
Accessory buildings in a residential, you're allowed to have an accessory building,
I'm getting to it.
yeah. So for example, if you wanna have a garage, a detached garage with an apartment above it, we are saying that's perfectly acceptable in the residential zones. Of course, there's other criteria you have to meet. If you're on a small lot, there's certain setbacks and the like that you have to meet also.
Under the proposal, rental cottage would not be permitted in a residential district. It is, through site plan review, permitted in an MD, marine development.
So rental cottages wouldn't be allowed there on the Anthony Street in that section,
As proposed.
as proposed.
So that would decrease all our value of the
Right.
house if we couldn't have a second structure.
Well, one of the reasons why the village has taken a slow stance or decided not to pursue short-term rentals, we're gonna have to develop a database, and we know already there are several, taxpayers that rent their homes out currently, or they're, short-term rentals. There's different definitions of the lengths of them. A lot, generally, it's anything less than 30 days. The other thing too, we have to watch out for, there may be deed restrictions in the deed that will not prevent you from, renting them out too, which, you know, that'd be something the planning board would have to ask the property owner on.
I have a question. In the old zoning, were bed and breakfasts allowed in residential areas? Because I know of one at least in this village that's been there for close to 20 years. So is that something new? Because that is one of the differences between marine residential and residential. And can we take certain things and make adjustments?
If they're operating now and we adopt the proposal as it is, they would be grandfathered in
Okay.
with it. You know,
And that's important, that's right, Lee, that's important.
And that's gonna be the sticking point, you know, when did you start your rental business, you know? Until you can develop a database, you know, it'll be a struggle, knowing that. It's what we call a pre-existing non-conforming use, if you want the technical term for it.
Let me ask you a question. In 400 words or less, if we decide, I mean, the rest of it doesn't seem to be a problem. You know, something was changed up on Sisson Street but Anthony Street seems to have the odd numbered side is the problem. Can we adopt the rest of it, but go back and look at Anthony Street and have a meeting that these people get told about, everybody that lives on that side of Anthony Street, that, you know, they don't want it to change from a marine development to a residential. And then I guess at some point, you have to have the people that live on the other side of the street, because are those people going to be happy if it stays marine development and there is a chance of real development across the street from their house? So, I mean, unless anybody has any major problems with anything else of this, which pretty much, basically the color of the map changed. What was marine residential, those, the different residential areas all turned yellow.
There were three
Different
residential
colors.
areas
Right.
that had very similar restrictions on them. There was very little difference between the three of them, and because the village is pretty well developed, I mean, in order to try to simplify things, we decided we were going to propose that we combine those three residential zones into one. And it was really for a matter of simplification than anything else. So, we didn't spend 2 years working on trying to make things more complicated. We actually tried to spend a lot of time making things less complicated. So, that's why there's one residential zone now instead of three.
So what I'm asking is, can we do the rest of this and hold on that? Do we wait on all of it? I mean, I don't want 2 years of work to go down the drain.
So that's up to the pleasure of the board. So what you've got, your committee has looked at your zoning, they've looked at your comprehensive plan, worked on it, they're offering a number of changes to the zoning. In order to make that work, what they've done is say, look, if you have 150 small changes to zoning, rather than have 150 different local laws, look to simply say, let's just have one. Repeal what you've got, replace it with something. What you've got is a draft. You're conducting a public hearing on it, and when that public hearing is closed, you can do your seeker on it, okay? And then it's up to you as a legislative body. You can either say, you know what, we like what we have in front of you, and you can adopt it. Or you can say, you know what, you've got a proposal and you can tweak it here or there. That's your role as the elected body, okay? You can tweak it, make changes, whatever you think makes the most sense. And then if you do, that could be what you're proposing as your local law, something that might be slightly different than what you have now. Now keep in mind, zoning, there's nothing sacred about it. If you get to the point that you make changes, and let's say you adopt what you have in front of you, that doesn't prevent the board, whether it's a week from now, a year from now, 10 years from now, saying we want to make changes to it again. You make amendments. It's intended to be a document that you change from time to time to fit the needs of your community. And that's actually what the public hearing is a good thing, is to provide input. And obviously what the village did, I think, was very good, that you also reached out to get some clean, fresh eyes taking a look at this from the county. They deal with a lot of these issues a lot. Let them provide some input. So you're doing it, in my opinion, you're doing it right. So I try to keep it below 400 words. You can, if you get to the point that you close your public hearing, you can adopt what you have in front of you, or you have the ability, the authority, the right to tweak it in ways that you think make better sense.
Without adopting the rest of it, so we wait.
You might say, well, we want to amend it as follows, change X, Y, and Z. Then you would do that. That's why the document's marked draft. Okay, so you'll do that, and then all of a sudden you'll adopt it, and this is the real world. I mean, all of a sudden, a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, you're going to say, you know what? We didn't think about this little twist or turn. That's a perfect example of when you say, well, then we're gonna look at that again, and you can make further amendments. In the U.S. Constitution, had found that they needed a number of amendments to that. We do it from time to time.
You said three areas with the residential got changed, the Anthony Street, Assistant Street, and what else?
There were three residential zones. Two of them were on this side of Route 12, and the third one was on the other side of Route 12. It seems that they were established many years ago when there was still being development done, Mr. Sweet, and now, because the village is pretty well built up as it's going to be built up, in order to simplify things, we tried to combine all three zones into one for the matter of simplicity's sake.
The setback distances with all three are comparable, you know, with it. It's not gonna make a drastic change with it.
Okay, but what I mentioned was up on Sisson Street where those houses are. What was that before, or is it the same?
Marine
It was marine development up
before.
there on the center circle in Sisson Street, and we're proposing that change to residential.
Good name.
Go ahead, you go first.
Go ahead.
My name's Matt Dorr. You guys are doing all this on a bunch of what ifs. Like, what if in the future? I mean, to me,
You never know.
it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You can't just sit there and try to prepare for all these things that might not ever come about.
You could have
Yeah,
a developer
that's
come in and
awesome.
say,
It's been working for a long time, so.
yep,
Why not just leave it the way it is?
Yep.
You know what I mean?
we could sit back and just let the village cave in and say, we've always done this for 200 years, why change it? Or we can say, can we make some of this easier for the property owner? And in some areas, you might have to, what's going on in the village? Is all the business filled up, or can some areas be added? Or we're gonna put in all housing, make it all residential? We don't have that crystal ball as to what's gonna happen. Let's go back 100 years. Who knew that Alex Bay would be the big place for tourism in New York State? This committee has worked hard to say, what's the vision? And it's not just the people here in the village. They utilize county people that take care of many communities to try to make this work. Just me.
You guys have done a really good job of looking at the big picture. I'd like to propose that you hold off on changing zoning on Anthony Street until at least you have some more input from the homeowners there. He made a really good point. Nobody is, it's a little stinky creek,
But I have a question for you. Let's say we decide to hold off, and there's 25 homeowners on the odd-numbered side of the street, and a letter goes out to all 25 homeowners. Are you all gonna show up? Would you all show up at meetings if we waited to sit and talk about this?
Well, that's an activist question, and I'm quite good at being an activist. I could probably get everybody.
Okay, that's what I'm asking, because a lot of times, we do this stuff, it does get advertised, it's, talked about at board meetings, at comprehensive plan meetings, nobody shows up.
Well, that's right. You're absolutely right. And that's and that's gotta be frustrating for you guys. Gotta be. So, amazing. Here are a few people that showed up because this is an issue that's important to them. Also, I asked this question earlier and I didn't really get an answer from the zoning people, which is, what about the shoreline of the owners that live there? What rights do they have to that? Can they dredge it? Can they put a little canoe landing in there? Is that part of marine development, or is that okay?
New York State owns the bottom of any of the water tributaries to the St. Lawrence River. And in order to do any type of work in there, you gotta get permission from DEC, Army Corps of Engineers, OGS, and then whether they approve it or not, then it would come back to the local board if there's a project. But that's the first step, getting those three agencies to approve the plan.
And that's whether it's residential or.
Regardless, because New York, unless you have riparian water rights, New York State owns the bottom. You don't have any right to go in there and disturb the bottom of that creek.
And
So-
I think that these.
So there's no water right there, I think,
Hang on.
And ma'am, I can maybe clarify that a little bit. The minute you get your big toe wet, the zoning board doesn't really have much say in anything. So whatever you do, docks, boathouses, anything out there, you go up over us and you get up into the state and the Corps of Engineers then. So regardless of what the whether it's designated as marine district or residential, as soon as you cross over into that wet big toe, it's pretty much out of our hands.
This gentleman back here had a question. Were you talking, sir?
Bruce? Sir?
Wayne Matthews,
Yes, sorry.
7 Anthony. So whether it's marine or residential, I can put my small boat back in my backyard and not worry about the zoning? And build a dock if I want a dock?
Right, yeah, you as the owner of the property have a lot of ability to do different things there.
So we don't lose our rights as owners?
No.
But if you wanted to change your backyard into a boat storage commercial facility
No.
under residential,
Personal, not
Or a
It
marina,
does
if you
not-
wanted to put a marina in there. What we're saying, and again, this goes back to why we were proposing this change, because that body of water does, in our opinion, did not lend itself well to any sort of a commercial development. As the private homeowner, you still have, nothing's going to change with what you're allowed and able to do there.
My father had it all permitted to be dredged back in the 80s.
Okay, and again, dredging, that's brought up a couple of times, it has nothing to do with the zoning at all. So,
but if it's changed to residential and you dredge and do your thing and decide you want to commercially store boats under residential, that would not be allowed.
No, just personal.
Right.
I think once it got
One
changed
second.
over, you'd be more back door again.
No, Mr. Short had a
I'm
question.
Paul Short, 49 Anthony Street, and you were saying about people having a business and they're not having a business. I wanna know why there's a boat rental in there with pontoon boats in there, about 20 of them in front of my place, and I own 80 feet out, and I do own the underwater rights. I got a deed on it and the whole works. And I think those boats, when they tie them, the dock goes this way, the creek goes up through there, they're tying them in frontwards. So they're coming out almost to block the little creek that these other people have going up Anthony Street in front of me. And they had some of them boats get loose, come over on my place. And I don't think that little place should have that business in there. I don't know why it's in there. And I don't think up on that hill, they better check the zoning of some of that.
That's Max.
I'm not familiar with who owns that, but across the water there, Paul, you own that, is owned by a commercial business, and if there's been docks put in there, it could have been before I started work here. I don't know the time frame to it.
Well, I'm not saying about the dock, but the business was
Well,
never there.
even the business with it.
Well, that's too small.
I would have to check and see who the actual owner is and stuff with it.
I don't know.
I mean,
It probably went to that farm, Ernie Mance, that's the one that dug the creek out, which I got part of that.
If you wanna come in the office and, so I know exactly what we're talking about, we'll file a complaint and I can look into it. The village does require you a written complaint if there's something pertaining to zoning.
Those boats are going in there, and I measured some of them, they're 28 feet long. Now, that's sticking way out from the dock, when you got 16 or 18 across there, too close to me, and I don't know how close my property line comes. I think those boats are tied to that dock frontwards, they're over on me. And they're tied there. I cannot stop them from using the water, but they have no right to tie something over my property. Is that correct?
Right, that's a come in and see Lee.
Yeah, come in Wednesday, Paul, and I'll pull it up on the
I've been gonna have
map
it
viewer.
surveyed, and I've had some of them boats that got loose, swing over into me. Well, they get these people run them, they don't know if they got an airplane or a helicopter, what they got. I see them back out, and they're looking backwards, and they swing right around and hit my dock. They hit one of the boats. I got a friend of mine, I let him put his boat there, I don't charge him nothing, and it hit his boat. And he raised hell about it, and that woman over there, whatever, she called him all kinds of names that some don't, maybe somebody never heard of. Run him out.
that's interesting, because that kind of drives the point home is, does Green Creek lend itself to more commercial development?
It doesn't. I'm sure it doesn't. It's not big enough.
It's, and that's really what the
Plus,
question is.
the little part of the creek that goes up in towards where they cut it off, past my place, very narrow, so they put float docks in there, right? They're at least 8 feet wide, 20-some feet long, or 20. Then they tied 2 pontoon boats side by side, so they're blocking it off. I mean, these other people got slits up in there, and they got a right to go up and down in there. But some of them couldn't put their boats in the water, they couldn't get out. My property does go right across the corner of that, and I own that.
Okay.
What time would you like your appointment to be with Lee on Wednesday?
What do you think, Lee?
You name your time, I'm here from 2 to 4:30.
Well,
I got an empty slate.
we'll split it, how about 3?
Sounds like a deal to me.
All right, one down.
Mr. Dory?
I think once you guys change it from the rest of the marine to residential, it's gonna be harder for some of them people to ever get a permit to dredge it. Cause I've seen a lot of people on the river that are denied permits, and it's the little tiny things like that can make a difference.
DEC and Army Corps treats each application differently. What you may apply for a permit could be different than how they analyze mine. There's no boilerplate with the state. I think we all realize that.
I've personally dealt with it, and I think it's some little tiny details that do make a difference. And I know because I've dealt with it. That's why I'm saying, if it's not broke, don't fix it.
That's right.
That's my philosophy.
Open a can of
Because I'm
worms.
telling you, once you open that, some of that stuff, you're not gonna get it. I know people that love to have permits for dredging, and it's some little tiny things like that that you'll never get it. So if it's not broke, don't fix it.
I think,
I'm Mary Ann Matthews, and we're up at the end of that little creek, and we really enjoy being there. But the strange part about all this is that we sit there and we look at the marinas. Everybody's backyard looks at all the marinas along there.
Yeah.
So why would it be anything but a marine district? Would my front yard be a residential and my backyard be a marine district? It just makes sense that it would be called a
Paul,
marine district.
on the average, end to end, what's the depth of that?
Time of year.
Depends on the time of year. What's the average depth?
Probably 3 or 4 feet, maybe. It's all been dredged out.
Not at my end, it hasn't.
So it
Maybe
makes,
not up where, way up
Our
there.
end, it hasn't, because.
That's a lot of rock up in there.
It's
Where I
Yeah,
am,
from under the road, it's
Yeah.
built back in.
I mean,
it's filled it back in, is what you said? Okay.
we can walk across without getting our feet wet.
Yeah, but I've also pulled a 22-foot boat right up by you too, though.
Yeah,
In the spring.
in the spring, yeah, now you can, now you
So-
can walk across.
Spring and,
So
in the
let me
spring and
ask
halfway through
this.
summer.
The general consensus is,
Nobody's listening.
pardon me?
Nobody's listening.
The general consensus is pretty much the rest of the zoning chapter looks okay. The big question is, do we change Anthony Street? Do we leave it alone? Is that what everybody's feeling?
it looks to me like
Not broken.
you're gonna change the roadside of Anthony Street over to residential, and then the other side of the creek, from here to there, you're gonna change that over marine, that's gonna stay the marine development, is that correct?
Yeah, on the other
Body
side.
side, why
On
should
Body
it be-
Castle
why
side?
should it be any different than us on the other side?
Okay, so let me finish. Would it be safe to say that the majority of this zoning change could be approved tonight, and there be a continuation of the public hearing on the zoning for Anthony Street Marine District versus residential, and notices be sent to every resident on Anthony Street? I'm just shooting from the hip. For a future date.
I don't think anything should be done about it now at all, because there's not
Okay, but-
hardly any people here, a lot of them are not here that live up there. that have something to do with it.
The summer residents should.
That's right, it's a bad time to do it.
Yeah.
So you would say wait until spring?
I would wait till summer.
Till it's,
Okay.
the people get around
Well,
and,
not
and
everybody gets
let
up
the
here in
people
spring.
that own
Okay.
water
Hold on.
property on there hash it over and see what's going on.
I agree.
When you're gonna notify people, we run into this at the town a lot with our zoning, when you're gonna notify people, you have done some advertising, you said the public hearings were advertised, so on and so forth, nobody comes to the meeting, there's no complaints, no opposition, we run into that all the time. Then when you come to a meeting like this, then you get people that show up. I'm curious how many people in this room got notices or are here because they heard about it from somebody or another reason. It sounded to me like a lot of people didn't know about this.
I heard about it last night.
I heard about it last night.
I didn't know nothing about it till a few hours ago.
Well,
But if you
I
want
thought
to change it, leave it.
you're doing Sisson Street, you're doing another area, I would just think you'd wanna make sure you notify everybody.
I don't think any decision should be made.
No.
Because it's gonna hurt.
Same as,
And I don't
whether
think-
it's a village or a town, you make public announcements at your board meetings. You have publications that you have to make
We do it all the time.
notifications to, everything.
Nothing happens.
Every so often, it's on Channel 7. Pam, if she's absent from a meeting, she watches the videos. And by the way, since April of 2020, we have, was it 2020 we started recording the same as you?
Probably.
Where, was it 2020 or 21, where we do the video?
We did it in 20.
20. I think you started in like March, and we started in April or May. So every board meeting is broadcast on YouTube. Tomorrow you can go to YouTube, pull it up, Village of Alexandria Bay board meetings, and you will see this meeting tomorrow. And all of them go back to the very beginning in 2020. We talked about it. It's on the village website, it's in the paper, and we've been doing this. Nothing is hidden from the residents. I'm sorry, I'm gonna say this, but 90%, 95% of the residents don't come to a board meeting. They have no interest in what's going on.
You're absolutely right.
And
I can't see what Sandy said.
when these people have worked this hard, and then 2 weeks ago, you're trying to cram this through. No, 2+ years is not trying to cram it through. So,
Yeah, but if we would've known
Nobody was
2+
What is
years
it?
ago, we would've paid attention more.
1 second.
Nobody was notified. And we didn't
And
address.
any more-
We didn't address Pete Brown's questions.
I'm sorry?
We didn't address Pete Brown's questions. You had his phone from Pete Brown?
Okay.
We didn't address his questions about property value.
Can I say something? I have
Certainly.
a question. Okay, so what if as a board, this is just the what if we made a motion that says, we're going to approve this today, but we're amending it so that Anthony Street and Sisson stay marine development?
Then why
Once
do
they get
anything
their
at
funding,
all?
that's
Why-
what-
Because a lot of it is verbiage and just updating it, and to me, that's wasting. The important thing to you folks here, and what is the major change in this that negatively, in bringing it into today's language and not something that was back from 1952. So I think I can live with passing this as long as we amend it so that what was marine development on Sisson and Anthony stay marine development.
Right.
I don't know how the rest.
I think if we know we're going to amend it, we might as well wait.
Marine development.
Exactly.
To wait on
Marine
amending
residential,
Sisson
zoning is
and
the
Anthony,
items.
or the
The
whole
whole
package?
thing, wait until
They have their own.
we let everyone know, and if we know, if we're going in knowing we're
You're
gonna
not
amend
bashful
it.
about taking the
Let's wait.
taxes, so you should take and
I
send
know
them
these
some
people put an
information.
enormous amount of time and energy into it, but if you're going in with that thought.
Then just notify everybody that,
Yeah.
And actually notify them. Not everybody does Facebook.
I
News
understand, the
Junkie,
the
YouTube.
village would have to send everybody
Yeah.
a letter and find you, and more than likely send it certified so that
Right.
everybody has to sign for them,
Right.
and we have a list of who actually did, so that when 2 people show up, we can go, oh, well. Or 100 people show up, I mean, who live here, I get it.
And how much is that gonna cost village taxpayers
Less
to
than the
submit?
research you did for the last 2 years.
Just a
One second.
few points real quick. Unfortunately, in New York, nothing's as easy as we'd like it to be. And, New York State, the Constitution, Article 8, Section 1, prohibits you using public monies for certain purposes. And if all of a sudden you took it upon yourself to provide, special notice to certain property owners, that would violate the state constitution as much as it might make sense. So what you do is the state says, well, when there are certain matters, you provide public notice. And that public notice is publication in the official newspaper of the community. You also can put it on a bulletin board. You also can upload it to your website. And yes, word of mouth and things like that. But from a technical standpoint, if you say, well, wait a minute, we're looking to adopt our zoning and we're gonna send notice to 25 residents out of the village, that becomes a problem from an equal protection and also from Article 8, Section 1. So you gotta be cautious with it. But let me back up from a bird's eye view. I mean, I know that I wasn't involved with the adopting or the drafting of the new proposed legislation, but the reason it's important one way or another is this. You probably have all heard the old adage that a man's home is his castle. And all that meant was if you owned the property, by gosh, you could do with it whatever you wanted. And that rule, we're aware of it, but it hasn't existed in New York State for more than a century. And in New York State, what happened was through the courts, the highest court in the state said, wait a minute, we think that it's important that land uses be limited in some way, shape, or form. Because if we don't do that, it could potentially let somebody do something with their property to the detriment of everybody else. And so 100 years ago, the state says, you've got to have to regulate uses. That's where you come in. Towns, cities, and villages, statutorily now, you have the authority, the jurisdiction to regulate uses in your communities. And it's one of the few areas, one of the very few areas that New York State says, you know, New York State doesn't know best. They're going to let you as the elected officials in your community do what you think is best for the uses in your community. You've got broad powers, how you deal with those activities, but it's important that you do exercise it. The reason zoning is important is because if you don't address something in some fashion, if it's not addressed, or if it's vague, then that means any use goes. An example, we're aware now of solar energy. If a community doesn't have something regulating solar energy, that means it's not covered, and that means I can put whatever solar energy I want on my property. The state might have certain restrictions on it. So all of a sudden you say, wait a minute, you do want to consider what you think makes sense in your community. That's why you run for office. That's why you get elected. So zoning is extremely important, because if you don't address it in some fashion, then you bet somebody comes in and they do something right next door that's a problem. An example that I have seen in the short time I've done work here in the village is signage. If you don't address signage in some fashion, then I can put a sign on my property wherever I want, of whatever size I want, and whatever lights on it I want, flashing lights, etc., because I think that's what I want in my property. That hurts your next door neighbors. And so legislatively, you've tackled it and you've addressed signage. That's a perfect example of why zoning is helpful. And that's what you're doing here. There's obviously a lot of updates that make sense, but it's to you as a legislative body, however you think it makes sense to consider moving forward with it, whether it's tonight, next month, or sometime thereafter. And yeah, it's getting input is important, but certainly keep in mind again that if you do make changes, it's not sacred, because all of a sudden if you say, you know what, we think we want to fine tune it here or there, you can do that as well, and you should dust it off from time to time to make sure that it works for your community as a whole. Oh, and I should also point out, you know, the idea of vested rights, so to speak, you know, it will changes to property, affect its value. Potentially it might increase it, might diminish it, we don't know. You can get 12 appraisers, and I guarantee you'll get 12 different opinions on what the impact is going to be. But as far as someone, you know, to have a vested interest, a vested right, you know, you don't unless the use you're undertaking is a lawful one, and it has to essentially be a significant part of that property. Speculation, no, you don't have a vested right for speculation with property. It just doesn't exist.
So to answer Mr. Carhart's comment about Mr. Brown's question about property value, I think Mr. Burrows just answered that. You get 12 different appraisers, you get 12 different prices.
Yeah.
You never know.
That's it, you never know. You just said it, you never know. If you don't know,
It could go up, it could go down. It's toss of the dice.
Usually when you put on restrictions, it doesn't usually go up.
you're usurping our rights.
Okay, let me ask you a question. If we voted tonight, what I put forward just a few minutes ago, if we voted to adopt this with amending Anthony Street to stay marine development and Sisson to stay the marine development,
Yeah,
that's what you are looking for.
yes. There's a lot of people here aren't. And there's a lot of people, as we said, that can't show up because they live elsewhere in the winter. Those people should be getting showed up.
Are you?
Right.
You know, my neighbor.
That's what they
My neighbor
want.
couldn't
It's
come because he's.
not mine.
My neighbor couldn't come because he's busy and he's having an operation.
But if it stays marine development, then your neighbor's happy.
Then he's happy. He's been talking to me.
Paul,
He'd be happy with that.
if we leave it alone, is that okay?
I think it should be left alone, marine development.
Yeah. Let's
Okay.
go
Are
on.
we ready to close the public hearing?
What's gonna happen,
Yep.
what's gonna do?
Does anyone else have anything different to say?
Ron?
This has nothing to do with Anthony Street, but I just wonder, Russ, a summary of the major changes, I would assume Anthony Street would be number one. I just wondered, in your opinion, what would be some of the other major changes? I heard a lot of cleanup verbiage and stuff like that, and I don't think anyone would have a problem with that. So what would you say some of those significant changes, other than the residential Sisson Street and Anthony Street are?
It's an excellent question, Ron, thank you. Tonight's meeting, there's a misconception that all we wanted to do was change some zoning on some streets. We've got, what, 30-some-odd pages, 40-some-odd, 50 pages in here. There's a lot more to it. One of the things we did was, because of new technology that's coming out, wind, solar. When this was written, there was no such thing as RVs. A lot of that stuff was addressed both in definitions and in putting guidelines as to what and where they should be able to be used. That had a lot to do with it. New technology had a lot to do with it. Simplification had a lot. Old zoning code, whenever it was written, and Steve, I think you hit this on the head, that it has been amended throughout the years, and one amendment on top of another one on top of another one creates confusion, and some of them were opposing each other. So, me being on the planning board, I can tell you for a fact that when issues came in front of us, it was very confusing to figure out what's allowed and what wasn't on the old zoning code. So one of the biggest things we did is try to clean up the confusion and simplify things. For example, the old zoning code would reference from one zone back to the other, and you've got carpal tunnel syndrome flipping from page to page to try to figure out what it was. At the suggestion of the gentleman from the county, we put a lot of this in table form. so that all you had to do was, if there was a specific use that you were looking at, you go to the table, it spells out what the action that's allowable in each one of the zones. So, the changing some of the zoning districts really was only a small part of what this whole thing was, which is one of the reasons it took us 2 years to get to it. There was a lot involved with it as far as the new technology, simplification, there was a lot to it, so, thanks,
So
Ron.
no, I mean.
There's no hidden secret.
What's that?
There's
No, I
no
realize that's
secret
not, and
changing anything
shame on
else.
me for not having read it all. So, all I'm saying is, if I were to read it all, okay, what would a normal person say, well, that's a rather major change? I mean, major changes can be good, I mean, it's in the eye of the beholder, so to speak. But I'm just wondering, you know, if, like, say, a side lot setback went from 15 feet to 30 feet, height went from 50 feet to 35 feet, parking went from 2 to 4 per X amount of square footage. I'm just wondering, things of magnitude, I guess, and it's not really fair because that's again in the eye of the beholder, but what other major things? Obviously, Anthony Street, that was major. And at Sisson Street, that's major. And just to make a comment on that, I know you don't have to send letters, but I know a lot of times when somebody gets a building permit or whatever, all the neighboring adjoining property owners get a notification. And then they can kind of check into it and then decide whether they want to show up for the meeting or not.
Mm-hmm.
And we always looked at it, when nobody showed up, everybody's happy. Well, it can be, nobody knows, you know, which is not a good thing.
Okay.
Because you're never gonna please everybody. But if you can please the majority, and then they can accept the fact that we live in a democracy and majority rules. I'll get off my soapbox. So anyway, I'm just curious as to what you would consider to be major other changes, other than like the verbiage, taking care of, like, if somebody doesn't put a huge windmill in their backyard, or solar that's gonna reflect into somebody, you know, and I just wondered.
Well, and right, and like, for example, the solar and the wind were not even addressed in the old one, so they're not really a change, they're an addition.
Another thing that's due to technology, EV charging stations.
Right.
And, you know, that's something that's gonna be ongoing and be changes down the road. There's 3 different tiers of charging stations, and, you know, how you wanna utilize them and stuff. Sandy brought up a good question about a bed and breakfast. I went through our current code. I couldn't find anything on bed and breakfast. I found something on tourist accommodations, but it doesn't make any reference to breakfast. It talks about overnight lodging for compensation. But then we go back under special use permits, it's listed as a place for bed and breakfast with a special use permit. So there's gray areas that, when this was developed, we didn't think of all those things, you know, at the time, so.
Did we change any height? Did we go from 50 to 30? Did we change parking? Did we, you know, I don't think we did any of that.
One of the biggest things that I noticed is, across Route 12, when that was originally laid out, and I don't know this for a fact, but it was put into very small lots that I would imagine were probably set up for like bungalows or things similar to Westminster Park. Westminster Park is a bunch of tiny little lots that originally I think they were just gonna put up little bungalows and like a, you know, that sort of a thing. When you look at the current map now, a lot of those lots have been combined into single lots that these houses are on now. So initially, the setbacks on those lots was very small because they were tiny little lots. Well, since it's been developed and those lots are larger now, we figure that the setbacks that are on this side of 12 will apply to that side too, because the lots are comparable sizes now, whereas when it was originally laid out, they were smaller. So is that considered a big change? Perhaps, but it also reflects a current condition that's there now, not what the original thinking was years ago when they laid it out. So I would consider that a major change. As far as another change from the old code to the new one, the regulations in the business zone, there were very few, and we didn't add any to that. We saw no reason to change the business zone because it seems to function fairly well as it is now. So, why change that? Lee, what other big changes did we have from the old to the new?
Well, I was going through here, I don't have the final draft, but in this one here, I have, red type with new definitions or how we change them, and I would be more than willing to share this with, outdoor burning furnace. That was never addressed
Technology.
before.
Yep.
Non-motorized motor vehicles, retail mobile. We had someone in here that wanted to do nails or something on the street or something, if I remember, a few years ago.
Yeah, but that was a whole different problem.
But again, you know, something that we've addressed, we talked about retail use, about pet shops, cannabis retail. Russ talked about solar. He talked about the wind. But, anything, I'll share this with anybody that wants to look at it, changes that we have made, and they're in red. We talked about a downtown overlay district. That's probably a bigger one for people that need to understand, because that does go into the, marine, development, area, as I remember, without showing it on the map.
You mentioned the overlay district, I see it on the map, and I was trying to see where it was described in the proposed zoning. Where does it exist, and what was the intent?
I'll let Russ answer that one, and I'm looking for the overlay.
I gotta look it up here, because that was something that, the gentleman from the county suggested toward the end of this process. But I think it's important for folks to know that as a private homeowner, not a commercial, but as a private homeowner, we had absolutely no intentions of taking away anything that you're currently doing on your property. It really, this whole thing along Anthony Street was really because of the commercial aspect of it. We're not taking your dock away and saying you can't try to get a boat in and out of there. That really was not the intention of this whole process. If anybody has anything else to say, go ahead. I'm gonna look for this overlay here.
Yeah, I just wondered, because I see the chart,
Need four.
which does, I know what you mean about the old, the existing zoning, where they go back and forth, on the references, but I don't see the overlay listed on the chart.
I think you're right, Ron. I've got the map showing it. It not only includes the business district, we do go into, the MD a little bit. I think you could probably, I think some of these are businesses, not that are businesses, but not included in the business district, with it. Because it does show some down on, Lower James. It shows some up on, Upper James, along the docks, with it. It does not include anything over, I'm gonna say, River Edge, that particular side of the village.
So I've got a black and white copy, so it's hard to see, but does the overlay include all the business district?
No.
Plus some of the,
No, it doesn't include all of it.
so some of the business district is left out, and some of the marine district is
It's
included,
included.
Correct.
which makes me really wonder.
So it's on page 41 of the draft that I have, and it basically refers back to the comprehensive plan about, design concept and things like that. We have a certain character downtown of what the structures are like. The overlay district seeks to keep that characteristic there. In other words, it tries to prevent someone from coming in and knocking a building down and putting up a steel and glass structure that would be completely out of place with the design and the architecture of that area. parking and access. Right now, all of the buildings are right at the sidewalk. Anything that's new and added, we would hope that would be in that the same setback on the sidewalk. So when you look down, all the buildings are straight up. There's not ones that are set back and they're staggered. That's what the downtown overlay is. And it goes into, it's mostly the downtown district and a little bit of the adjoining parts of the Marine Residential District. It has nothing to do with usage. It has more to do with architecture and aesthetics.
I love the idea of architecture and aesthetics, but who makes the decision of what looks good and what doesn't look good? I'm not saying this as a critique, but, you know, everyone has their own opinion.
Right, you're right, and it's similar to the comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan puts forth a lot of suggestions that you would like the town or the municipality to try to follow. And that's basically what this overlay is. It's not really a regulatory zone, it's more of a suggestion zone.
Suggestions are easy to live with.
Right.
But I think probably undoubtedly anything that's in this overlay district is gonna require site plan review, so it's gonna go before the planning board for their input, you know, with it. And they do have some latitude. The planning board can, add things that are not overly restrictive, that, you know, it's within their guidelines, especially in a special use permit. They could ask for maybe additional lighting, for example, or, maybe how the facade is, how it's being designed with it.
Ron, we're asking you, if you develop down there, to try to conform with what's there. We're asking you. That's what the downtown overlay is.
Some of downtown would be nice to not conform to your neighbors.
Well, that's it.
Downtown's like say that.
Well, you know, and it goes back to, you know, a glass and steel structure.
Yeah.
Do we prevent you from putting that up? Probably not. We're asking you to consider, is that really characteristic of what the village is?
So it's come a long way. I was joking there. It's come a long way in 20 years. You look at pictures of downtown 30 years ago, and looks a lot nicer now.
Any more public comments? Any more public comments?
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second it.
Motion to close public hearing by trustee Fulmer, second by trustee Caputo. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Old business. Consider adoption of chapter 150 zoning for the village of Alexandria Bay Code.
Motion.
I'd like to make a motion that we accept the zoning with the following amendments. Leaving Sisson Street and Anthony Street, Marine Development. Also, on page 22, section 150-9, I believe there was a typo there that residential, R for residential should be in. I think it was just inadvertently left off.
Page 150,
No, page 22.
or excuse me, page 22.
Page 22, 150-9.
50-9.
Yeah, they have a list of the zoning districts. Residential got left off of there, and it needs to be added. I would also like, on page 23, section 150-11, under bed and breakfast, I would like that to be a special use permit under residential. Because I know we do have them here in the community, and I think bed and breakfast in a residential area is just fine. That's my motion.
I'll second that.
Motion by trustee Caputo to amend Anthony and Citizen to leave as Marine District. Page 22, section 150-9, change the administration on that, and page 23, 150-11, specially used for B and B for residential, correct?
Yep.
Motion by trustee Caputo, second by trustee Fulmer.
And before you vote on that, just a quick check, 239M review was complied with?
Yes, it was. That was gonna be my question. Do we have to send it back to the county with amendments now?
No, I was gonna say, I think the 239M, I haven't seen any comments or anything, but.
The board addressed the comments from the county.
Okay. Those changes, in my opinion, don't have to go back to the county for 239M, but you do have to go through that seeker process before you consider adopting the legislation. I'm sorry, it's just, New York State doesn't make anything easy, folks.
Yes.
Can you read it?
Yeah, so what you have is in a nutshell, you've got the short environmental assessment form, part 1. And you've had that for a month or so, and the key is this, it is a repeal and replace of your zoning. Question number 1 is does the proposed action only involve the legislative adoption of planned local law ordinance? The answer is yes. Because it's yes, then what happens is unless there's some objection, you don't have to answer anything further on part 1. The mayor, you're authorized to sign part 1, and then you go to the next portion of seeker unless there's any concerns with that. If not, then what happens is your part 2, you've got that, and with the short environmental assessment form, there are only 11 questions. And I want to make sure you're aware, what we're doing is we're not putting a shovel in the ground. You're simply adopting legislation. And so what I did is, it's your prerogative, but I suggested that with each of those 11 questions, the answer would be no, would be a small impact or no impact at all. And those questions are as follows. 1, would the proposed action, adopting zoning, create a material conflict with an adopted land use plan or zoning regs? The answer would be no. Will a proposed action result in a change in the use or intensity of use of land? I say no, because again, if somebody wants to change it, they've got to comply with your zoning. Number 3, will the proposed action impair the character or quality of the existing community? I suggest no. 4, will the proposed action have an impact on the environmental characteristics that cause the establishment of a critical environmental area? Recommend no. 5, will the proposed action result in an adverse change in the existing level of traffic or affecting existing infrastructure or mass transit? I recommend no. 6, will the proposed action cause an increase in the use of energy and it fails to incorporate reasonably available energy conservation opportunities? Suggest no. Will proposed action impact existing public or private water supplies? No. Public or private wastewater treatment utilities? Suggest no. Will proposed action impair the character or quality of important historic, archaeological, architectural, or aesthetic resources? I suggested no. 9, will the proposed action result in an adverse change to natural resources such as wetlands, water bodies, etc.? I suggested no. 10, will the proposed action result in an increase in the potential for erosion, flooding, or drainage? I suggested no. And last, number 11, will the proposed action create a hazard to environmental resources or human health? I suggested no. Because of your prerogative. If you disagree, please let me know and I'll make changes to the document. If there are no hesitancies, then what happens is you go to the part 3. With that, what I did was I had drafted a proposed part 3, but again, it's your prerogative, and with it, I suggested that adopting legislation only would not have the potential for an adverse environmental impact, and in that you'll see the paragraph that it says the action is legislative only. The village board has familiarized itself with the village comprehensive plan and recommendations from its planning board and members of the public. The board has determined to make numerous changes to the village zoning law. updates will be best accomplished by repealing current zoning laws and adopting the rewritten, updated zoning laws. Future activities will abide by seeker reviews as necessary. So that was my recommendation. If you think that's appropriate, then what you would do is consider the resolution that I prepared. Do you want me to read that for the,
Yes,
for the
please.
record, or, okay, so the resolution.
My coughing is a little bit too,
Okay,
sorry.
so what the resolution is resolution blank of 2023, I don't know what number you're.
Number 2.
This is just the second one?
Is this to repeal and replace, chapter 150?
So.
Or the declaration?
No, the negative declaration for seeker.
Resolution 3.
Okay, so what it says is as follows: whereas the Village Board of the Village of Alexandria Bay has considered the adoption of legislation in the Village of Alexandria Bay in connection with the Village's zoning law, and whereas the Village Board of the Village of Alexandria Bay has reviewed an environmental assessment form for the purpose of assisting the Village Board in making a determination of significance in respect to legislation, of whether the enactment of the legislation would have a significant adverse impact on the environment, and whereas the Village Board finds this action to be type 1 as set forth, identify the regs, whereas having considered the action consisting of the adoption of legislation and the potential environmental impacts associated with such action, the Village Board is determined to proceed. Now, therefore be it resolved that the Village Board of the Village of Alexandria Bay finds that the proposed action of adopting the legislation is subject to seeker, and be it further resolved that the action constitutes a type 1 action under these particular regs. Be it further resolved that the Village Board is the agency with jurisdiction by law to fund, approve, or directly undertake the action, and therefore a coordinated review of the action under seeker is neither required nor necessary. And then the real key: be it further resolved by the Village Board of the Village of Alexandria Bay that, number 1, based upon the examination and consideration of the environmental assessment form and comparison of the proposed action and criteria as set forth at these particular regs, no significant impact on the environment is known by the adoption of the proposed legislation. Number 2, the mayor for the Village of Alexandria Bay is authorized to execute the environmental assessment form, parts 2 and 3, to the effect that the Village Board is issuing a negative declaration under seeker. And then number 3, the complete copy of everything's on file with the Village Board, Village Clerk rather. That's essentially what the resolution does.
I need a motion for resolution number 3.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 3.
Second.
So we do a roll call vote. Trustee Caputo?
Yes.
Trustee Fulmer? Yes. Trustee Kemmons? Mayor Jarvis, yes. And then number 2 is the resolution to repeal and replace
Yes, so now
chapter
you've
1.
got a motion to amend the proposed local law as has been expressed by Trustee Caputo, and then you'd look for the second, and has that been seconded?
Yes.
And then your vote in favor of the potential amendment, and then you'd consider, adopting the local law as amended.
The roll call vote, Trustee Caputo.
Yes.
Trustee Capetti.
Yes.
Trustee Fulmer.
Yes.
Mayor Jarvis, yes.
Now you'd consider a motion to adopt and enact the local law as amended.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Trustee Fulmer.
Yes.
Trustee Caputo.
Yes.
Trustee Capetti.
Yep.
Mayor Jarvis, yes.
So what I will do then, tomorrow, I'll reach out to our village clerk and I'll work with her to make sure that I've got a clean copy of the local law as amended, and then I'll work with her to make sure we get everything filed with the state. The zoning doesn't become effective until it's actually filed with the Department of State, and that, even if we send it out tomorrow, it takes a week or two before it becomes effective, and once it becomes effective, I'll make sure to report to the board.
Who's in charge of changing the colors on the map?
What's that?
You're in charge of changing the colors on the map? Everybody will be happy.
I'll talk to the county, because they have their mapping person.
But I will need a clean copy and a clean draft to be able to file with the state.
Anything else? Should be good. Motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
Terry Campany, second by trustee Fulmer, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you all very much. Thank you.